Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settled in, and begin The Well in the White Woods, Part 1. I'm on a flight heading back to my hometown, trying to unravel the mystery that's lingered in my mind since childhood. Let me take you back so it makes sense. I can still feel the red clay under my nails when I think about it. Remember the scent of old hay in the barn, and hear chickens squawking as we chased them through the pen. That mean old rooster. We called him Satan's alarm clock. Used to get so angry he'd turn purple beneath his feathers, pecking at our ankles until we scrambled over the fence like clumsy gymnasts. Looking back, that rooster gave us our first real lesson in respect. Sometimes the smallest things can hit the hardest. I'm Matthew. Most people call me Matt, and this is the story of how my brother Larry and I ended up spending the summer of 1992 on Grandpa Joe's cattle farm. We were soft, city-raised kids, more used to screen time than hard work, until Grandpa's heart started to fail, and Dad moved us out there quicker than a storm warning. This farm's been in our family 4 generations, he said, his wando clenching the wheel until his knuckles went pale. You boys need to learn how to keep it going. The change hit us like a freight train. One minute, we were riding bikes in suburban neighborhoods, and the next, we were cleaning out stalls and learning to milk cows, our hands raw and blistered. Our nearest neighbor was Mr. Peterson, 5 miles down a muddy road that turned into soup every time it rained. Those early weeks were so lonely, we gave all 30 chickens soap opera names. The bold and the beautiful, days of our lives types. It didn't take long to realize all chickens look alike when they're running away from you, but kids adapt. We found out mud fights beat any video game. Stacking hay bales was more fun than jungle gyms, and the stars out there were so bright it looked like the sky was overcrowded. We also learned the hard way about electric fences. Larry's hair stood straight up for hours. That mama cows don't like strangers near their calves. I've never run faster, and why it's smart to check your boots for spiders before sliding them on. Larry spent a day hopping on one foot. That first summer, Dad taught us to shoot, starting with tin cans and eventually hunting. The first time I shot a deer, I cried and threw up in the bushes. Larry stood silently, the way he did when things got real. That day taught us about life and death, lessons you can't get from a video game. We learned that food doesn't magically show up in stores, that taking a life matters, and that being tough means feeling everything but still doing what's necessary. We made our share of mistakes, like when we helped by painting the barn with old primer from the shed. Rain washed it off overnight. Or when we tried to ride a calf like a horse. Bad idea. Every bruise and blunder was a lesson in disguise. We learned about responsibility, facing the results of our actions, and how being brave and being reckless are sometimes separated by a very thin line. Things changed when Dad remembered his old friend Jim lived just over the county line with his 2 kids. The day we met them, the air was heavy and the cicadas were screaming. I remember standing in their gravel driveway with Larry behind me like a shadow. Funny thing, he wasn't scared of anything except meeting new people. Hey, I'm Matt. This is Larry, I said, trying to sound tougher than I felt. John, looked at us like we were aliens. "I'm Jonathan. This is Missy." His sister stared at me with these huge brown eyes, like she was trying to memorize my face. "You guys ever catch frogs?" John made a face like we'd insulted him. "Why would anyone want to do that?" "'Cause they're fast, slippery, and sound hilarious when you poke them." "Come on." Our land was massive. We ran to the creek not far from my place and spent the day splashing, pants rolled up, shouting every time someone caught one. John got competitive once Larry landed a massive bullfrog. Missy would sneak over, free our frogs, and bolt, shrieking with laughter while we chased her through the tall grass. By sundown, we were covered in mud and mosquito bites, and something like lifelong friendship had taken hold. That summer stretched out like warm taffy, each day filled with something new. We learned to read rain in the clouds, whistle through grass blades, and catch fireflies without hurting them. We found out the best conversations sometimes happen in total silence, sitting on a fence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no crayon could match. Most of all, we learned that growing up isn't something that just happens. It's something you build, one scraped knee at a time. It was during that summer that I first heard of the White Woods. Larry and Missy were down at the creek catching tadpoles, their voices echoing across the yard. I was standing in the tall grass, swatting mosquitoes, when I noticed something odd at the edge of our land. A cluster of trees rose up beyond the regular woods, trees that looked wrong. Their bark was pale, like dried-out bone, and they stood in a straight line, maybe a mile off, almost glowing in the afternoon sun. The sight made my stomach churn. I turned to John, sitting nearby, scratching bug bites like mad. I smacked his hand away and pointed toward the trees. "Hey, what's that over there?" "We haven't gone out that way yet, right?" John didn't respond at first, but when he finally looked, he froze. His face went pale, his freckles standing out more than usual. "Just stay away from those woods, okay?" His voice had that odd, serious tone he used when pretending to be more grown up than he was. "Why not?" I asked, instantly curious. Anything that rattled my usually fearless friend had my full attention. "People go missing there," he said quietly, picking at some grass. "A lot of people." "Yeah, but why?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice even though Larry and Missy were too far off to hear. John shrugged, but his discomfort was obvious. "No one really knows. That's what the police say. Some people think there's something in there. A monster, maybe. Or someone dangerous living out there, taking people. Like Jason," I whispered, thinking of that horror movie we secretly watched last weekend. "Yeah," John said, finally locking eyes with me. "Maybe worse." Later that day, I asked my dad about it. His answer was firm. "Stay out. Don't even get close. There are things in there," he said quietly, in the same tone he used when he talked about Mom. Dangerous animals and stuff. All right, that was all I got for a while. School started that fall, and our group stuck together like glue. Me and Larry joined football thanks to John's constant pushing, though we both preferred basketball. Larry got picked on by some bigger kids until he figured out how to use their size against them, waiting for their charge, ducking, and letting them face plant in the mud. John and I laughed ourselves sick. After school, we usually hung out at my place until Dad got fed up with the noise. When we got tired of running around outside, we found a quiet spot in the library behind the encyclopedias, where Mrs. Shank couldn't see us. We'd read comics, trade cards, and plan our weekend adventures. When we weren't outside with sticks and maps, we were there. And that's when the White Woods came up again. Larry and John were deep into a Pokemon card trade in our library corner, whispering about rare hollows. Missy sat beside me, giving me a crash course in local history. Coming from the city, I never paid attention to hometown stories, but in small towns, people take that stuff seriously. Maybe it's pride, or maybe there's just not much else to do. Hey Matt, wanna hear something weird? Missy's eyes lit up like they always did when she was about to share some random bit of knowledge. Go for it, I said, trying to hide my smile. Most people shut her down when she got like this. I never did. You know how everyone says to stay away from the White Woods? She leaned in. That's actually the reason this town exists at all. That got my attention. Wait, what? Yeah, according to this book, the founders were totally... She squinted at the text. Enamored, I said, trying to keep a straight face. She punched my arm, firm enough to send a message, but still friendly. Know-it-all, she grumbled. That's when Scott from the football team peeked around the bookshelf. We weren't exactly rivals, but we weren't sitting together at lunch either. You guys talking about the White Woods? He asked, doing that fake casual voice people use when they're itching to say something. Missy rolled her eyes. Nope, just discussing physics. Scott ignored the sarcasm and wedged himself into our corner anyway. My dad swears there's something out there. Monsters. Now that was the kind of local legend I lived for. Coming from the city, where the most unsettling thing was the subway after midnight. This stuff was gold. For real? Like what kind? Skinwalker, Scott said quietly, like the word itself was risky. He heard one, said it made animal noises, but wrong, like it was faking. Oh, please. I tried to sound bored, but honestly, I was hooked. If something like that existed, don't you think someone would have gone full monster hunter by now? But I heard, John looked up from his Charizard card. Scott, no one cares about your preschool campfire tales. But I did care. That moment probably kicked off my obsession with the White Woods. Mrs. Shank once warned us not to talk about them. Her tone was sharper than usual. Even now, that memory still sticks. From then on, my curiosity only grew. That summer, the oak tree on our farm became our hangout. One hot afternoon, we climbed it together, helping each other reach the top where the branches formed a natural seat. I pulled out Dad's pocket knife, the one he still doesn't know. I borrowed and carved our names into the bark. Mine, Larry's, John's, and Missy's. All inside a roughly drawn heart. Now, we're gonna be best friends. Forever, Missy said with a grin. That year was full of adventures. Like when we tried riding a calf and ended up covered in more manure than anything else. Or when we built a raft for the creek using barrels. And rope, only for it to sink instantly when John stepped on it. We caught fireflies in jars, whistled using blades of grass, and once even tried teaching a chicken to fetch. His name was Professor Clux. He didn't take to it, but I couldn't shake the White Woods. Every time I closed my eyes, those pale trees filled my vision. I started asking questions at school, but everyone clammed up. Teachers changed subjects. Students suddenly remembered they had to be elsewhere. Their reactions only made me more curious. John was the one who finally broke, despite being held back a year. When something interested him, he was laser focused. We all were. When something got our attention, we chased it to the edge. "You're still stuck on that whitewood stuff?" he asked, catching me between glasses. His shoulders were tight. "You know how it is," I said. "The more people avoid it, the more I want to know." I laughed. But he didn't. He grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. "Look, man, as your friend, drop it." His voice dropped. "My dad was a cop here before you moved. Started looking into some disappearances near those woods. A chill crept in. What happened to him? He died. Shootout. The only one this town's ever had." John's grip tightened. Right after he started asking questions. "Coincidence?" He didn't sound convinced. "Don't you want to know why?" I asked before I could stop myself. "If it was my dad." "No." John cut me off. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw real fear in his eyes. "I don't. That's the truth." He let go, but the weight of his words lingered. Looking at him, I realized this wasn't just a ghost story. This was something personal, something still raw for him, something that had left a scar that never really healed. But I couldn't shake the feeling, that gnawing sense that there was more. That afternoon, it was just John and me. Larry and Missy were in a different class, so we ditched the rest of the day. There was a bathroom at school with a window that never latched. One jump, and we were out. We wandered through town like we owned it. The fall air had that perfect bite. At first, we talked about usual stuff. Homework, how endless Mr. Peterson's class felt, and how being 13 was basically a joke. Funny how those turned out to be some of the best days of my life. But something shifted. "You guys ever show me all the cool places around here?" I asked, kicking a rock. "Feels like there's still stuff I haven't seen." John hesitated. "Well, there's the old town well, but no one really." I perked up. "Wait, what well?" "Forget it," he muttered, staring at his shoes. "Come on, don't be a chicken." I punched his arm. He returned the favor. All right, he sighed, checking the street. "It's in the White Woods. Used to be a dare. Kids would try to find it. Then this kid, Jerry, I think, went out there. When they found him, he wasn't right. Kept talking about tunnels underground and things." My heart pounded. "Wait, that's just like what Scott said his dad heard." "Scott's full of it," John muttered, but he didn't sound sure. "But what if he's not?" I grabbed John's sleeve. "What if we're the ones to figure it out? Like those kids in movies who solve mysteries?" John's face flickered between excitement and dread. "Imagine if we found something. We wouldn't be nobodies anymore." I paused. No more. Being the new kid. We stood there a moment, just soaking that in. Then came that feeling. You know the one. When you're about to do something either amazing or really dumb. "My dad won't be home for hours," I said. "Let's go." We ran back to my house, backpacks bouncing. My mind raced. At the house, I grabbed Dad's pocket knife, and we climbed up to my rooftop spot. You could see the whole town from up there, and the White Woods looming like a shadow at the edge. John stared at the trees. He looked afraid, but also like he didn't want to be. "We need to make this official," I said, flipping the knife open. What are you? Oh my God, Matt, no. His eyes went wide as I dragged the blade across my palm. It stung like crazy, but I didn't let it show. John, I said, sounding like the heroes in my dad's old movies. You're not just my best friend. You're my brother now. And I swear, no matter what happens, I'll protect you, even if it means I get hurt. You're nuts, he whispered. But he looked at me like no one had ever promised him that before. His hand trembled as he held it out. I made a quick, shallow cut, but he still yelped. We pressed our palms together. It felt like something real. John cried, quietly, but it said everything. We spent the rest of the day playing games and drinking Kool-Aid, pretending the cuts didn't sting. When my dad came home and found out we'd skipped school, he flipped out, but it was worth it. The next day, we told Missy and Larry at the library. No way, Missy said immediately, her braids flying. That's insane. Larry's interest perked up, though. What if that kid found something real, like treasure or something? Or what if he got eaten? Missy shot back. We need you, I said. You're the only one who knows how to use a compass. Yeah, John added. You're braver than the rest of us. Exactly why I should stay back, to tell them where to find your remains. After an hour of begging and bargaining, she finally gave in. Fine, but only because you definitely messed this up without me. We spent lunch planning. John would get spray paint from his dad's garage, the glow-in-the-dark kind. I'd bring my knife and enough snacks for a small army. Larry had old flashlights in the barn. Missy, still muttering, agreed to bring her compass and a detailed map from scouts. The plan was simple. Meet at sunrise, just enough light to see. Early enough, no one would notice we were gone. Find the well. Make history. No one slept that night. How could we? We had a blood pact, and those mattered. At least in the movies. Then came March 22nd, 1993, the day we entered those cursed woods. The air felt wrong, heavy like before a storm, though the sky was clear. We walked through the tall grass, getting closer to the woods than we had ever dared. There was no turning back. My feet crunched on branches. We were inside. The trees all looked the same, white bark glowing faintly, twisted branches like skeletal arms. Time bent in there. We walked for what felt like hours, but the sun barely moved above the canopy. The air changed, felt old and stale, like something from an abandoned house. I was ready to turn back following John's red X's. Then I heard it, a sound that chilled me, like a goat bleeding, but wrong, like someone faking it while crying. Before we could react, Missy was running toward it, her hair streaming behind her. Larry chased after, calling her name. John and I looked at each other, just two scared kids, and followed. Branches scratched us, roots grabbed at our feet. The woods had us. The sound led us to a clearing. Larry and Missy were frozen. We joined them and saw why. Well, ancient, half swallowed by forest. Trees wrapped around it like they were trying to bury it. That terrible bleating echoed up, bouncing around until it felt like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. A rope stretched from the mouth of the well, vanishing into a perfect circle of blackness. Larry was already descending, and Missy followed close behind. There was something about the mouth of that well, something that made my vision blur, like an optical illusion refusing to settle. My stomach twisted with a sickness that felt ancient. older than my own life, older than the trees surrounding us. I wanted to follow Larry. He was my brother, but my body wouldn't move. My muscles had gone slack. The goat's cries grew more frantic, almost human, until suddenly the rope went still in my hands. The silence that followed was worse than any noise I'd ever heard. "Larry!" My voice cracked. "Larry, are you okay?" Missy's scream tore through the air like shattered glass. It wasn't the kind of scream that comes from surprise. It was the sound of someone trying to unsee what they had just seen. John gripped the rope, knuckles whitening with strain. He looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw a kind of brave resignation in his eyes, like he already knew what was coming. Then he disappeared into the dark. The rope slipped through my shaking hands, foot by foot, until he was gone from sight. The noises rising from the well weren't natural. Wet shuffles, groans that sounded vaguely human, but weren't. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but Larry was still down there. My brother. I took a step forward, but my body rebelled. Cold sweat broke out across my skin, and my vision narrowed. Even at 12, I recognized the feeling. It was the same primal fear that made early humans run from shadows, that taught us to fear deep water and dark places. The rope jerked violently. I stumbled back. Then John came bursting out like a man, surfacing from drowning, scrambling at the edge of the well. He dragged himself out and turned to pull Missy up after him. But when they stood in front of me, my heart froze. Larry wasn't with them. The space beside them felt like a wound. Missy's face looked hollow, stripped of everything that made her who she was. The rest of that night is hazy, like a dream I was trying not to remember. I remember yelling at John, begging to go after Larry. The fear I'd felt had hardened into something sharper. I just knew, deep in my gut, that every second we waited was a second too late. But John grabbed my shoulders, turned me toward Missy, and said, "Look at her." His voice shook. "I don't know what they saw down there, but she's not the same. We were kids, sure, but Missy had always been the fearless one. She climbed the highest trees. She once punched a kid for killing a frog with a rock. She went into that well ready to help whatever creature was crying out. Now she stood there shaking, staring into nothing. Whatever was in that darkness had broken her. We ran. By the time we reached open ground, night had fully fallen. My dad stood at the tree line, flashlight sweeping the dark, worry written all over his face. When he saw us, relief washed over him until he counted us. What happened next is a blur of disconnected moments. My father sitting us down, his voice trembling as he made us swear to never speak of that night. Then he took a flashlight and a rope and vanished into the dark. The hours dragged like years. When he returned, alone, something about him had changed. I watched from the stairs as he poured drink after drink, mumbling into his glass. At one point, he smiled, a strange, haunting smile I'd never seen on his face before. "My boy," he whispered. "My boy reached the room before I did." I didn't understand then. Part of me hoped I never would. The years after Larry vanished blurred together like ink in water. I spent most of my time sitting in that old oak tree, staring into the woods until my eyes burned, waiting for Larry to come walking out. Drama's funny that way. It either pulls people together or shoves them apart, surviving something like that can bond you for life or leave a permanent stain on every memory. I guess that's what happened with us. What we went through was too big to forget, and it changed everything. I spent 3 years mostly alone. I'd become the outcast. People probably thought I'd given up on Larry, and maybe for a while I had. But deep down, I always believed something beyond explanation had taken him, and I knew if I didn't try to understand it, no one else would. I threw myself into the occult, but nothing fit. No stories, no folklore, not a single mention of wells or what might dwell inside them. That only deepened my isolation. No one wants to talk to the kid obsessed with monsters and ghosts. I got used to it. John, Missy, and I would pass each other in the halls, sometimes making brief eye contact. But the weight of the past kept us from speaking. That is, until I turned 16. I was hiding in the library one summer afternoon, buried in textbooks, trying to lose myself in facts. That's when I heard footsteps. Matt, John whispered, awkward and unsure. His hands jammed in his pockets. Missy hovered behind him, quiet. I didn't look up. What do you want? We miss you, man. He pulled out a chair. It scraped loudly on the floor. It's been too long. Yeah, well, my dad made it pretty clear I should stay away from you guys. Something about leading us into the White Woods. Even I was surprised by how bitter I sounded. That's not, John winced. You know that's not how it went. Missy and Larry, just say it, I snapped, finally meeting his eyes. Larry, my brother, the one who never came back. Look, I'm not angry anymore, but my dad's not changing his mind. Missy stepped forward, her voice fierce. And you're just going to let him control you? Doesn't it strike you as strange that he told us to stay silent? About Larry, about everything. Of course, it struck me as strange. That question had haunted me for years. But what was I supposed to do? Stand up to my dad? Back then, I thought, obeying him was the right thing. Now I was beginning to see just how much he'd shaped my thoughts. We talked for hours that day, tucked away in the back of the library. And when Missy finally told me what she saw down in the well, my world shifted. It wasn't just a pit. There were tunnels, endless, black, branching out like spider webs. She'd seen Larry dragged deeper into the dark, his hand reaching back. Something had tried to pull her too, but Larry, stubborn, brave Larry, helped her escape. When John arrived, all he found was Missy, sobbing. The strangest part, John hadn't heard anything. No goat, nothing. That's when the questions really started stacking up. Why had Dad insisted we stay quiet? Why did he seem to age a decade overnight? We decided to go to the police, regardless of the risk. The sheriff listened, nodding with a condescending smile. The kind adults wear when kids tell ghost stories. People disappeared in the White Woods, sure, but tunnels, wells, fantasy. We weren't claiming it was supernatural. Maybe someone was living down there. Maybe that explained the disappearances. We scoured old police files and newspaper clippings. That's when we found something that hit me hard. Larry didn't fit the pattern. Most victims were adults, but then there was one case. A man who vanished in the woods with his son, Jeremy. The boy came back, but he was never the same. Ran away constantly, always returning to the forest. His file mentioned the well, Jeremy, redacted, age 14, found catatonic near the town's old well. He'd been institutionalized. I hadn't even known the town had a psychiatric hospital. He was still there. But he had a sister, just a few years older than us. I nudged John. Didn't you tell me about a kid named Jerry once? Yeah, John said, squinting at the file. Guess his name was Jeremy. It says here he has a sister. She's about 20. John and I locked eyes. A plan was already forming. Missy saw it and shook her head before we said a word. After an hour of arguing, she agreed to go talk to him, alone. We'd wait outside, ready to help if needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Dad was by the window, bourbon in hand, rocking as he stared out at the trees. Moonlight caught in his graying hair. Dad, I said, barely above a whisper. What really happened to Larry? What's in that well? He turned slightly, eyes red. Then he looked back into the woods. So young, he murmured. So many questions, I snapped. You know something. You've always known. My brother is gone and you just sit here drinking. You're supposed to protect us. I expected him to yell. Instead, he crumpled in on himself, took another drink and whispered, You'll never understand. The choices I've made. It's bigger than us, Matthew. Much bigger. He closed his eyes. Go to bed. Lying in my room for the first time in years, thinking of Larry didn't feel like prodding an old bruise. It felt like a call. I could almost hear his voice echoing from somewhere deep and far away. Help me. Come find me. Even now, I sometimes hear it in my dreams. The bleating of that goat and Larry's scream fading into the dark. And I wonder if I'm dreaming at it all. We met at the oak tree as morning fog lifted. The grass was damp with dew. We huddled close, reviewing our plan. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Maybe it was the anticipation, or maybe it was the summer heat pressing down on us. Melancholy's Peak. That's what the rusted old sign read. Barely legible, like the place wanted to be forgotten. It sat like a decaying castle on the hill, brick and iron staring down at the town. They built it up there for a reason. Out of sight, out of mind. We leaned our bikes against the rusted fence. Missy smoothed her borrowed dress, hands trembling. She didn't look like herself. She looked like someone pretending to be someone else. I'd never seen her so nervous. The ranger warned me to leave the trail before sundown. I didn't listen. I've always preferred hiking alone. It's not that I hate people. I just like the silence. Out there in the woods, there's no pressure to talk, no deadlines, no emails. Just trees, wind, dirt, and me. So when I stumbled across a barely mentioned trail called Dead Pine, while planning a weekend trip up north, I was intrigued. No official website, no recent trail reviews, just a few blurry photos and some outdated directions on an old hiking forum. It sounded perfect. The drive took me far off the main roads and into thick wilderness. I passed one tiny gas station with hand-painted signs and a general store that looked like it hadn't been restocked since the 90s. By the time I reached the trailhead, it was already past 3 p.m. I figured I'd do a quick loop, maybe 2 hours tops, and be back before dark. As I stepped out of the car and started lacing up my boots, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel behind me. I looked up and saw a park ranger walking down the path toward me, but something was off. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Gaunt face, pale skin, twitching under one eye. His uniform was official, but the name tag had been scratched. so badly I couldn't read it. And he wasn't wearing a hat, just a mess of thinning gray hair that blew wild in the wind. "You planning to hike this trail?" he asked flatly. "Yeah," I said. "Just a short one before sundown." He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared at me. "You need to leave before dark," he said. "Do not be on the trail after sundown." I blinked. Okay, I was planning on heading out before then anyway. He stepped closer. His eyes looked glassy now, almost like he wasn't fully seeing me. "No," he said. "I'm not warning you because of wildlife or weather or getting lost. I'm telling you because it gets inside the trees after sunset." My skin prickled. "What does?" He opened his mouth like he was going to say something else, but no sound came out. Just silence. Then he shook his head, turned around, and walked back toward a weathered ranger station just beyond the trees. I stood there for a few moments, unsure if I should even go in. But I'm not exactly superstitious. I've heard of plenty of overdramatic ranger stories in my time. People just trying to keep tourists cautious. So I did what I always do. I adjusted my bag, locked my car, and stepped onto the trail. I didn't know it then, but that was the last normal moment I'd have for a long time. Dead Pine Trail lived up to its name. The trees here weren't like the ones I'd hiked through before, tall, narrow, and unnaturally still. Even when the wind picked up, their branches didn't sway. No birdsong, no insects. Just this low ambient hum, like the whole forest was holding its breath. About 30 minutes in, the path started to narrow, roots tangled across the dirt like veins. A thick carpet of moss muted my footsteps. I paused at one point to take a drink of water and realized I couldn't hear anything. No wind, no rustling, just silence until the whispering started. At first, I thought it was the wind, a faint hiss in the distance, like leaves brushing against each other. But it wasn't random. The sound had a rhythm, a cadence, like words spoken just out of reach. I spun around, scanning the trees. Nothing, just trunks and shadows. I told myself it was in my head. Dehydration, maybe. Too much caffeine on the drive up. Then I saw it. A circle of stones just off the trail. 7 of them. Each one worn and cracked, arranged in a perfect ring, no more than 10 feet across. I hadn't noticed it on the way in, and I sure as hell hadn't stepped off the trail before now. The stones had markings on them, faint, angular symbols scratched deep into their faces. Runes, maybe. I'm not an expert, but they looked old, very old. I stood there, staring at the circle for a long time. The whispering got louder the closer I stepped. I felt a kind of pressure in the air, like something didn't want me there, like the forest was watching me. I backed away slowly and checked my watch. 6:12 p.m. Shit. The sun was already dipping low. The light had gone from golden to a dull, smoky gray. I didn't have time to explore. I needed to turn back. But as I retraced my steps, something was wrong. The trail didn't look the same. Trees I'd passed earlier were gone. A fallen log I remembered stepping over was missing. The forest felt denser, like it was closing in, and no matter how far I walked, I never passed any of the landmarks I remembered on the way in. I pulled out my phone. No signal, GPS spinning like crazy. The blue dot twitched in circles, like it couldn't tell which way I was facing. Then, somewhere behind me, snap, a branch broken underfoot. I froze. Snap, crunch, snap. It was pacing me. I spun around and shouted, "Hey, who's there?" No answer. Just that same damn humming noise. Soft, slow, familiar. A melody now, not random. Almost like a lullaby. It seemed to come from inside the trees, echoing from the trunks themselves. And then, between two narrow pines, I saw movement. A shape, thin, too tall to be human. Pale, standing completely still, as if waiting for me to notice. I didn't stick around to get a better look. I ran. The humming followed. I don't know how long I ran. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe longer. Time stopped making sense somewhere between the second and third time. I passed the same dead tree, a splintered pine with a deep gash down the middle that looked like a mouth. No matter how far I went, the trail looped. I kept ending up back near the stone circle, though I never saw it directly. I'd catch glimpses of one or two stones through the trees, just enough to know I hadn't gotten away. And the humming, God, that humming was getting closer, not louder, closer, like it was moving, like it was following. My legs were jelly, my lungs burned, but something in my gut told me if I stopped, even for a second, it would find me. I stumbled downhill, crashing through underbrush, branches slapping my face. At some point, I dropped my water bottle, then my flashlight. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. That's when I saw the figure again. Not running, not chasing, just standing, half hidden by a wide pine tree. Not behind it, inside it. I blinked, and for a split second, I swear the bark of that tree shifted, like skin crawling over muscle. The thing's head tilted slightly. It had no eyes, no face, just a suggestion of features, like something was pretending to be human and failing at it. Its mouth, wide and unnatural, was still open. The melody was coming from inside it, and I realized something I hadn't before. The song was changing. It was copying something. It was copying me. I took off again, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Every root and rock grabbed at my boots. Trees seemed to lean in closer. No wind, no birds, just that tune, now whispering from every direction. Then I saw lights. My car. I don't know how I made it out, but suddenly I was at the edge of the woods again. The gravel lot was exactly how I'd left it. My car was parked under the dim glow of a busted floodlight. Only, the ranger station was different. Windows boarded up, paint peeling. The whole thing sagged with age like it hadn't been used in decades. I ran up and banged on the door. No answer. I looked inside through a crack in the wood. Cobwebs, empty shelves, dust everywhere. I turned back toward my car and froze. The trees at the edge of the forest were moving, not swaying, shifting, bark splitting open, revealing pale slivers beneath, mouths, dozens of them, all humming, all in sync. I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropped them, and slammed myself into the driver's seat as I peeled out of the lot. I swear, just for a second, I saw a shape in my rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the road, waving. It's been 3 days. I haven't slept. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see bark cracking open and something smiling inside. And last night I walked past the woods near my apartment. There were no pines there before, but now there's one, just one, and it's humming. Every night, someone in the forest sings a lullaby, and while it lasts, you must not step outside. It has shattered my life. Every night someone in the forest sings a lullaby, and while it lasts, you must not step outside. It has shattered my life. I was born in a small town, half forgotten by everyone. It stood on the edge of the forest, a forest that didn't just rustle, but seemed to breathe. Even during the day, it was a place one didn't want to go, but at night, it became a living hell. The trees didn't just cast shadows, they made the shadows linger in one spot. The house where I was born and grew up stood directly across from those cursed trees, a wooden structure with thin walls and wide windows, groaning in the wind. It was there that I spent all of my childhood. It was there that I learned to fear the time between 1 and 3 in the morning. I didn't just learn to fear it, I learned to obey it. From the moment I was born, I heard a lullaby at night, not from my mother or father, but coming from the forest. Every night, something hummed the same lullaby. Not a single word, and this voice, it was not human. Ragged, breathless, hoarse, as if singing hurt like the lungs were covered in moss and dirt. But the lullaby started every night. At one moment it would grow louder, at another quieter, sometimes interrupted by a long, hoarse breath, like an animal's sigh, heavy and damp. But right after that, the lullaby would continue. My parents heard it too, as did all the houses near the forest, but no one ever spoke of it directly, even though everyone knew it. My questions about the lullaby would make my mother turn pale, and my father would frown, putting down his tools and whispering a single rule. Don't go outside between 1 and 3. Never. My parents weren't rich, quite the opposite. We always lived almost in poverty, with debts, huge medical bills, and my father's work keeping us tied to this place. So we stayed in that house. During the day, I went to school, played with the neighborhood kids, lived a fairly normal childhood, except for one thing. As soon as it started to get dark, I, along with my friends, would run home as fast as we could because soon it would begin. At 1 in the morning, like thunder on a clear sky, the lullaby would start from the depths of the forest, and something wanted the song to soothe, but it only filled us with the dread. From 1 to 3, I would listen to it if I hadn't fallen asleep by then, or if I woke up, I'd hide under the blanket. I tried covering my ears, not listening to it, even praying, but I could still hear it clearly. Over time, I just grew used to it, and even learned to fall asleep to it. As it turned out, it was a Russian lullaby, the kind meant for babies to fall asleep to. I even listened to the original version. The original sounded eerie enough, but the version that came from the forest, it was even darker, scarier. Life went on with the one rule, don't go outside at night. And when I turned 10, my little brother Mark was born. With bright blue eyes, he was a very curious child from the start. Curious and stubborn. The lullaby turned my childhood into something sleepless and fragile. A fragment I wished to forget, but for Mark, it was something else. When he turned 6, he began asking the same questions I once asked. Our parents said the same things to him they had said to me, and they always reminded me to watch over my younger brother. to make sure he didn't look out the window at night and under no circumstances never go outside at night. Mark nodded, saying he understood. We thought he really had understood. That winter night our parents went to a neighboring town, just as small as ours, to help our seriously ill aunt. They begged the neighbor to stay with us, but he refused. I don't even remember why. They were supposed to return by morning, and before they left, my mother kissed Mark on the forehead, reminding him to go to bed before midnight. And then she looked at me with a more serious gaze. Keep an eye on him. Mark and I sat in my room. The wall clock struck 12, and I said it was time to go to bed. But he started crying and begging for just 10 more minutes to play games or tell scary stories. I looked at the clock again, and with a heavy sigh I agreed. We had a great time, and I didn't even notice how an hour passed. I noticed it because of the lullaby, which started in the forest. La la la, la 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 la. La 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 la, la 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 la. I looked out the window, and so did Mark. I quickly drew the curtains so nothing was visible, and told Mark to go to bed. Once I was sure he had fallen asleep, I lay down on the couch, planning to rest for just a few minutes before going to watch TV. But I accidentally dozed off, giving in to the strange lullaby's lull. I was woken by cold. The window was open, and I felt a fear I had never felt in my life. A fear I will probably never feel again. I screamed involuntarily and ran as fast as I could. Mark was outside, barefoot and in the cold, staring at the forest as if hypnotized. The lullaby stopped, and the only sound I could hear was the howling of the cold wind. I dragged him back inside, closed the window, drew the curtains, double-checked the door, and propped it up with a chair. "Why did you go out there?" I hissed, barely holding back tears. Mark was pale and trembling, but not from the cold. He was shaking with fear. "I saw someone. I thought it was Mom. She was waving at me." My heart pounded wildly, and I couldn't believe it was happening for real. I prayed it was just a very realistic dream, but it was reality. I took Mark's hand and backed away, trying not to breathe too loudly, slowly looking around, checking the house for anything unusual. For the first time in my life, I didn't hear the lullaby at night, just for a minute. And then, la 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 la, la la la, la 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 la. The lullaby was coming from right behind the wall. I heard heavy footsteps, something struggling to take breaths, still humming. The lullaby. It was circling our house, listening to what was happening inside. Mark started crying, and I covered his mouth with my hand, though I could no longer hold back my own tears, which streamed down my face. We crawled under my bed, and I still held Mark's mouth with my hand. The lullaby continued, sounding as if something was already in our room, when suddenly there was a loud crack, and I saw shards of glass falling on the carpet in front of us. Something had broken the window and seemed to have looked into our room, still singing the lullaby. It started walking again, heavy, unnatural steps right toward our front door. The door groaned, and then I heard a muffled thud directly against the door. It was a strike on our door. Something was breaking it. Another strike, and the lullaby began to sound within our house. The chair I had propped the door with flew across the hallway, smashing into the wall. We stopped breathing trembling under the bed and huddling together. First, we saw its legs, moose legs, long, crooked, covered in rough fur. Its split hooves clattered on the floor as it passed through the hallway, still humming. In my mind, I prayed, begged it not to find us and just leave. But instead, the creature came into our room. It knelt on all fours right in front of the bed, and we saw its face. It was worse than death. It was the face of a moose, but overall it looked like a werewolf. One of its antlers was cracked and stiff, the other completely broken. A rusty hunting knife was embedded at the base of its skull, its face twisted, resembling a mix of beast and corpse. Dried blood covered its rough fur, and its small red eyes stared into our souls. Steam came out of its nostrils as it exhaled, and its mouth, long, twisted fangs. It stopped singing when Mark screamed in terror, and I wanted to scream too, but I felt paralyzed with fear. One of the moose's arms, long and twisted, held an axe. With the other, it reached for Mark. It grabbed him, screaming and struggling in my arms, despite all my efforts to hold on to him. The moose lifted Mark and pressed him to its chest, my little brother trying to break free, scratching and kicking, but the moose kept walking, humming the lullaby, and gently rocking Mark as if he were a baby. I didn't know what I was doing. My body moved faster than my thoughts, and I lunged at the moose, trying to stop it, grabbing its leg. But it didn't stop. In the blink of an eye, I was struck in the face with the axe handle, and I fell to the ground, unable to rise. My vision blurred and became very fuzzy, but I saw my little brother trying to break free from the creature's death grip, screaming, "Don't leave me." And then the moose slightly turned its head in my direction. It breathed heavily, and its little red eye looked at me, letting me know it had remembered me. It took me a little time to get on my feet, leaning on the walls. I managed to crawl to the open door, which had a huge hole from the axe. I looked outside and saw the moose taking Mark into the forest, humming the lullaby and rocking Mark as if he were its own child. And he kept screaming and crying. At that moment, I lost consciousness. That was the last time I saw Mark. No one saw him again. When my parents returned, they wailed, but not like humans, like dying animals. My mother fainted, my father cried, and for the first time in my life, I saw him cry. They aged in one day. My father turned gray just a few days later, and my mother stopped speaking altogether. They were never the same. My father started drinking every day, and my mother would do housework mindlessly, not knowing why or for what. Her eyes vacant. I cried every day, blamed myself, cursed, wished the moose had taken me instead of my little brother. I stayed in that house for a few more years before moving to college in another city. And every night, while I stayed there, the lullaby would start again at 1 in the morning. But the scariest part, since then, the lullaby has grown much louder, as if it were right outside our house. My father boarded up all the windows and chained the door, wondering why he hadn't done this sooner. But it was too late. Late at night, I cried and couldn't sleep when I heard a soft tapping at my window, barely audible over the lullaby singing right outside my window. I got up and peered through a small gap between the boards and saw that red eye. We stared at each other for just a few seconds, and then it went back into the forest, still humming the tune. I'm writing this far from home. My contact with my parents has ended. We have nothing to talk about. We are just living corpses with no desire or meaning to live. But even in my new city, sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I swear, I hear it. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. It's probably just my imagination, or maybe he really has started hunting me. I've never told anyone this story, but now my pain and fear, which have consumed me for all these years, have become unbearable. I take a lot of pills to numb these feelings, but nothing helps. What scares me even more are the monstrous nightmares that torment me every time I sleep. The moose is holding my younger brother deep in the night, calling me into the forest to join them. My brother doesn't cry. He sits in the moose's arms, saying he's happy. He and the other children. My roommate doesn't sleep because he needs to remember. I live with a guy named Levi. We split rent on a 2-bedroom in an old duplex outside Austin. It's not a bad setup. The place is run down but livable, and we mostly keep to ourselves. At first he just seemed like a quiet guy. Bit intense, maybe, but not in a dangerous way. But after a couple of weeks, I noticed something weird. He doesn't sleep. I don't mean insomnia. I've never seen him sleep. Ever. Some nights I'd get up around 2 or 3 a.m. and he'd already be awake, just sitting at the kitchen table. No phone, no laptop, no food. Just sitting there. Sometimes scribbling something in this old notebook he carries around. Other times, just staring at the wall. The first time I asked him about it, I was half joking, like, "Dude, do you ever sleep?" He looked up at me and said, totally serious, "Not yet." That was it. Just those 2 words, and he went back to his notebook like nothing had happened. It creeped me out a little, but I brushed it off. Figured he had some sleep disorder, or maybe he was just one of those hyper-focused types. But over time, it started to get under my skin. Little things changed. The apartment got weird. I'd walk down the hallway and swear it was longer than before. The light didn't reach the end of it some nights, like it had sunk into the walls. Once I thought I passed a door on the way to the bathroom. It was just there, on my right, for a split second. When I turned to look again, it was gone. Smooth drywall. No seams. Nothing. I tried not to think too hard about it. Then I started hearing things. Every night at exactly 3:18 a.m., I'd hear 3 knocks, not on my door, not on Levi's, on the wall between our rooms. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Always the same rhythm, always the same spot. I asked Levi again, directly, "You hear those knocks at night?" He didn't even look at me this time. Just said, "That's not for you." I let it go. But that phrase, "not for you," got stuck in my head. It felt like he wasn't talking about the sound. It felt like he meant the whole thing. So 2 nights ago, I stayed up. No distractions, just me, the couch, and the hallway. I didn't even move, just watched. The apartment was silent. At 3:17, the air got dense, not cold, heavy, like walking into a room where someone's just had a screaming match, and the energy hasn't left yet. At 3:18, the knocks came. 3 of them. Slow, like whatever was knocking wanted to be heard. Then something happened. The wall between our rooms didn't just knock, it moved. The drywall sort of rippled like a heat wave off pavement. And then it was a door, an actual door. Old wood, no frame, brass handle. It just appeared, And before I could even process it, Levi walked out of it. He didn't acknowledge me. He didn't even glance my way. He walked straight through the living room, barefoot, wearing this faded shirt I hadn't seen before. Looked like it said something about a summer camp, but the letters were too worn to read. He opened the hallway closet and stepped inside. Now, that closet, it's maybe 3 feet deep, just coats and a broken vacuum cleaner. But Levi didn't stop. He kept walking like the closet was just the beginning of something else. I followed him. I didn't even think about it. My body just moved. Inside the closet there were stairs. Long, descending stone stairs. Cold at first, then warm. Too many to count. The air down there didn't feel like air. It was thick. Made my skin buzz. The walls felt alive. At the bottom, there was a room. Huge. Way too big to be under our house. The walls looked like layered paper. Old wallpaper peeling. But the layers shifted like they were breathing. Like they were aware. Levi stood in front of a mirror. Only it wasn't a mirror. It didn't reflect anything. It was just noise. Like static. Like a TV tuned to nowhere. He was whispering. Not in English. Not in anything I've heard before. Just moving his mouth, slow and steady. Like he'd been saying it for years. Then he stopped. Turned to face me. His eyes weren't right. They weren't bleeding or glowing or anything cliche. Just off. Like they were blinking in and out. Like I was seeing too many frames at once. And my brain couldn't line them up. He looked at me and said one thing. Now we both remember. I blacked out. I woke up on the kitchen floor around 6 a.m. with a nosebleed and dirt under my nails. His room is empty now. Not messy. Empty. Like no one ever lived there. No bed. No clothes. Nothing. Just the notebook. Left on the floor. Still open. One new line written at the bottom of the page. Don't forget me again. I don't know what he meant. I don't even know if I was supposed to see it. But I think the door is going to open again tonight. And this time, I don't think it's going to wait for Levi. I think it's for me. I didn't sleep last night. Not that I really planned to. I couldn't even sit still. I walked circles around the apartment for hours, then sat on the floor by the closet just staring at it, hoping it wouldn't open, hoping it would. I kept checking the time. At 3:18, nothing happened. No knocks, no ripple, just silence. And for a moment I thought, maybe it was over. Maybe Levi left, and that was the end of it. Then around 4:12, I heard something upstairs. Slow movement. Footsteps, maybe. But we live on the top floor. There shouldn't be anyone above us. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. I was thinking about calling someone, but who do you even call for this? A cop? A priest? A contractor? I went back to the closet, opened it. Still coats, still a vacuum. Nothing else. But I swear, when I shut the door, I felt something change. Like the room behind me was holding its breath. Today's been weird too. My phone won't hold a charge. Every clock in the apartment is stuck at different times. 2:03, 5:49, 11:11. The microwave reset itself twice. The static on the TV is louder than it should be, even when it's muted. There's a smell in the apartment now too. It's faint, but it's like something old, like soil, or paper, or something that's been buried for too long and finally cracked open. And I keep seeing flashes. Nothing major, just movement in mirrors, in dark corners. Nothing when I turn and look, but enough to know something's here. I've tried to throw the notebook away twice. Both times it ended up back in my room, not on my desk, on my bed, open to the same page. Don't forget me again. I'm starting to wonder if Levi ever really lived here at all. I don't remember him signing the lease. I remember him being here, but I don't remember the actual moment he arrived. And I keep thinking about what he said. Now we both remember. I've been having dreams. Not dreams really. Images, waking flashes of places I've never been, but feel familiar. A hallway that loops. A staircase with no top. A mirror that watches instead of reflects. Something's changing. I can feel it. I'm scared to sleep, scared to leave, scared to stay. But underneath all of that, the worst part is this tiny voice in my head that keeps saying, "You asked for this." And maybe I did. Maybe this has been waiting for me longer than I want to admit. If anything else happens tonight, I'll post again. If I don't, and you never hear from me again, check your own walls. Listen at 3:18, and whatever you do, don't open the door. Childhood haunts. I stand in the driveway staring at the house I grew up in. It's up for sale again, and I can't shake the pull to come back. The open house is tonight, and here I am, 28 years old, parked in front of the place that haunted my childhood. The house looks worse than I remember. Peeling paint, sagging gutters, the deck half rotted. The kitchen windows glare down like eyes. The French door on the deck sits like a crooked nose, and the basement door at the base of the house gapes like a hungry mouth. My stomach twists, the same dread I felt as a kid washing over me. I shake it off. I'm not that scared a little boy anymore. No cars are in the driveway, no signs, no realtor. Is this even an open house? The front door's unlocked, though, so I step inside. The air hits me, heavy, thick, like it's been trapped in here for years. Dust floats in the dim light, filtering through the curtains. The kitchen smells of mildew, and the living room's carpet is stained and worn. I move down the hallway, my footsteps echoing. The floor furnace is gone, thank God. I used to lie awake at night, terrified something from the basement would reach through those grates and grab me. To the right, where the furnace once was, is the basement door. That damn door. Old, warped wood, splintered at the edges, with a rusty knob. I freeze. A chill crawls up my spine, and I feel it. Something dark, seeping through the cracks, pressing against me. I'm an adult now. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be scared of a basement, but my hand shakes as I reach for the knob. I yank the door open, and darkness spills out, thick and endless. The stairs creak faintly, though nothing moves. My heart pounds. I can't stop myself. The words bubble up, the same ones I used to shout as a kid, standing at the top of these stairs. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I say, my voice trembling. Come face me. The air shifts. A cold wave rushes over me, prickling my skin. I slam the door shut, cheeks burning. God, I'm an idiot, yelling at a basement like I'm still 8. I turn to leave, ready to get the hell out of this house. I don't want it, not anymore. Then I hear it. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, thudding up the wooden stairs. My breath catches. They're getting faster, louder, shaking the floor. The door explodes open, splinters flying. It's him, the man my mother and I saw outside our windows all those years ago. His face is twisted, angry, his eyes pure black, like holes that swallow light. He's in old, tattered clothes, reeking of earth and something sour. He storms toward me, arm outstretched, fingers clawing the air. I stumble back, but he's too fast. His hand clamps around my neck, cold and impossibly strong. He lifts me off the ground, my feet dangling, his grip crushing my throat. I can't breathe. Those black eyes bore into me, and I feel it. A hatred so deep it's like he's been waiting for me all these years. My vision blurs, darkness creeping in. I wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, tangled in my sheets. My bedroom, my apartment. My hand flies to my neck, half expecting bruises, but there's nothing, just a dream. It was just a dream, but it felt so real. The house, the basement, him. My phone sits on the nightstand. The real estate listing's still open from last night. The open house is today. I could still go. I should go. It's just a house, right? A rundown old place with bad memories. I'm not a kid anymore. I can face it. But as I stare at the photo of the house on my screen, those windows like eyes, that basement door like a mouth, I can't shake the feeling that it's waiting for me, that it's always been waiting. I put a roommate ad up around my college. The calls haven't stopped since. Hey everyone, my name is Henry, and I've been searching for a roommate for about 3 months now. Only one real person has actually called me, but a lot of strange things have been going on before that. I can't sleep or focus, and I need help in trying to find a rational explanation for all this. If you know anything, or have had something similar happen to you, please let me know. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this if nothing changes. I'm currently in my junior year of college and am preparing to go into my senior year. I've never really been one for a huge friend group, and I think a lot of people would consider me a social recluse. I did the 2 years of on-campus housing that my college required of me, but it was never easy for me. Not because I had horrible roommates or anything like that. They were actually surprisingly clean and good people. I just preferred to live alone and have my own space. Luckily, when I was going into my 3rd year, I was able to score a pretty low-rent, single-bed apartment a couple of miles away from my college. It wasn't the best apartment in the world. The walls were thin, and it never smelled right. But it was mine. I never had this kind of freedom growing up, so living alone was partly a rebellion against my upbringing. About 4 months ago, the rent prices here in San Diego started to go up, and I won't be able to continue renting this apartment for long with my current income. My lease was up in 3 months, so I had until then to find a new apartment. As much as I want to find another single apartment, I had no choice but to split it with a roommate because of the prices. Fortunately, I was able to find an apartment that is still cheap enough to where I'll be able to split it with someone and still have some money left over, assuming I was able to find someone. I got in contact with my old roommates and friends, but none of them wanted to or were able to move in with me. I didn't hold this against any of them as it's our 3rd year of college, and most friend groups have solidified by now, and everyone is already either locked into a lease or already has a planned group of people to live with. Again, I didn't have a lot of friends in the first place, so I'd have to find a random roommate. I wasn't too upset by this idea as my roommates in freshman year were also randomized. Granted, they were randomized through the school, so I was roomed alongside people the same age as me and were enrolled in the college. The downside of trying to find a roommate now is that I have no agency like that. So technically, anyone who sees my ad could respond. I ended up printing and posting these signs up around my college area that read, "Roommate wanted single. Room in 2BD, 1BA, apartment 207-597-479 and 3. My hope was that another college student would see this sign, give me a call, and we could go from there. I didn't post it online because I've read way too many horror stories about people posting roommate ads online and getting bombarded with weirdos and creeps trying to move in. This way, I could at least try to limit the groups of people who would see my sign. About a week after putting these signs up, I received my first phone call. It occurred to me then that I hadn't even put my name on the sign. So from the perspective of any caller, they were essentially calling a stranger as well. As my cell rang, I looked at the caller ID and saw a random number I didn't recognize. "Hello, who's this?" I said, and waited for a few seconds for a reply. But all I could hear on the other end was static. "Hello, is anyone there? Are you calling about the roommate ad?" I asked again. There was still only static coming from the other end of the receiver as I briefly brought the phone down from my ear to look at the number, and then back up again. It didn't have the scam likely line under the number, like most of the random calls I got in the past, so it must have been a real number. "Help," I started to say, before being cut off by the click of the phone as whoever was on the other end of the line hung up. I checked the number for a third time to see if I recognized it, but I didn't. I tried calling the number back, but all I was met with was the ringing of a phone that would never be picked up. In the end, I just attributed it to being a wrong number and put it out of my mind. I didn't receive another call until 4 days later from another number that I didn't recognize. I figured this time I should introduce myself and confirm the reason that the person was calling. "Hello, this is Henry. Are you calling about the roommate AD?" I said and waited a few seconds but didn't hear anything but the crackle and static of the phone line. "Hello, are you there? Can you hear me?" I asked inquisitively. I thought maybe that something was wrong with my phone, and perhaps they couldn't hear me and that's why they didn't reply. Or maybe I couldn't hear them. "This isn't funny. Can you say something if you can hear me?" I said while I waited for a response. Frustratedly, I took initiative and hung up the phone. Maybe a group of college kids saw my ad and decided to prank me. Our college was a pretty big frat school, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was the case. I was honestly getting more annoyed than anything at this point. I tried calling back again, but was met with the same result as before. The worst part about it is that there was nothing I could do about it. I had to pick up every call in case it was someone trying to get a hold of me for the roommate ad, which left me in a constant state of dread. I didn't have to wait long as the next call came at about 8 a.m. the next day. The ringing of my phone woke me up, and I remember fumbling around trying to answer it in time. Groggy from sleep, I answered with my usual phrase, "Hi. Hello, you've reached Henry. Are you calling about the roommate ad?" While what I heard wasn't a voice, it was something different than the usual static on the other end of the line. It was subtle and I didn't hear it at first, but I'm positive it was the sound of breathing. It didn't sound normal. Like, when you're on the phone and all the noise coming through sounds very mechanical and prickly because of the static. This had none of that. As quiet as it was, I could hear it perfectly, almost like someone was actually breathing into my ear. "Hello? Who's this? It's really early for you to be calling," I said, blood beginning to rise in my face. No response came, and the breathing just continued whispering in my ear. I could almost feel the breath coming through the phone. "This really isn't funny anymore. Can you just say something or stop calling me?" I asked again as panic started to rise in my voice. I still didn't get a response. The breathing just continued. If you don't say something, I'm going to hang up," I threatened, hoping to get at least some sort of response. But I didn't, so I hung up. I didn't try calling back this time. By this point, I was fully awake. Whatever grogginess I had while answering the call quickly disappeared into dread once I had started to hear the breathing on the other end of the line. There was no reasonable explanation I could tell myself why it was so clean. I've been on the phone plenty of times, and it's always been that unmistakable statusy kind of translation of sound waves being transferred miles over wires and radio waves. I realized after hanging up that I didn't even check the number of the caller, so I went into my call history to find it. I saw the previous 2 phone calls right next to it, as these were the only calls I had received this week. But just like the others, it was a new number. Later the same day, I decided to go walk around my college and make an amendment to all of my signs. I didn't like being pranked like this, and although this probably wouldn't change anything, it would at least put my mind at ease for a little bit. After a few hours, I managed to write another line to all of my signs, and it now read as "Roommate wanted single. Room in 2BD 1BA. Apartment 207 597 4793. Serious inquiries. Only I didn't receive." Another call for 3 weeks. The time spent between was a mix of wondering about the 3 phone calls I had gotten and anxiety about not receiving any calls about my ad. I thought that maybe whoever was on the other end of the line had gotten bored with pranking me and they finally moved on. Or maybe my addition to the signs knocked some sense into them. But I realize now that couldn't be farther from the truth. The next call I received was as I was walking home from work at around 10 p.m. I didn't own a car, so I had to either walk everywhere or take a public transport. Usually I take the bus to and from work, but it didn't show up on time, so I was forced to walk. My house wasn't far, only a few miles, and luckily it was all flat. "Hello, this is Henry," I said while answering the phone, forgetting to include asking if they were calling about the ad. It was late, and my mind was occupied elsewhere. "Hello," I said again, with a boring indignation, as all of the mystery calls and empty lines came flooding back to me. This time was different. For the first time, someone or something finally responded. "Hello," said the voice on the other end of the line. The edge to my voice instantly disappeared, and a wave of relief washed over me as I was finally greeted by another voice. I stopped walking and let my shoulders sag with relief as I responded. "Yes. Hi. Hello. This is Henry. Are you calling about the roommate AD?" I asked eagerly with a new sense of excitement, as I thought someone was finally going to actually ask about the ad. I waited patiently for the voice to respond. "Hello," the voice said back to me. "Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?" I asked once again. Maybe they didn't hear me the first time. "Are you there? You there? Hello?" the voice said back to me. "Yes, I'm here. Who is this? Are you calling about the ad?" I was beginning to get slightly frustrated as this back and forth continued. I waited for them to respond, but the only sound I could hear through the phone was static. After what felt like a lifetime, I spoke again. "Hey, can you hear me?" I started walking again while I waited. The response never came, and I hung up angrily. I walked the rest of the way home thinking about the phone call and getting upset at whoever was on the other end of the line. I was upset, but maybe they just couldn't hear me very well. After all, they seemed to be replying, and this was the first caller to actually have said something. There was something off about the voice, though. Just like the breathing weeks before, there was something about it that felt wrong, but I couldn't yet name what it was. If it was someone pranking me, there had to be at least 4 of them, as every single number was different. The next call came 6 days later at midday, almost like a routine at this point. I picked up my phone, answered the call, and said, "You've reached Henry. Are you calling about the roommate ad?" "Calling about the roommate ad," the voice said back to me almost immediately. This took me by surprise, and I remember having a visceral reaction as I jumped out of my seat a little, as the sudden response was so different from what I was used to. It took me a few seconds to even realize what the voice had said, and that it was just saying what I had said, minus a few words. "Who is this?" I asked into my phone. I waited a few seconds, eagerly listening for any kind of noise on the other end. The voice didn't reply as fast this time. It took about 10 seconds before it spoke again. "Are you calling about the roommate ad?" the voice said. Although there was no mocking tone to the voice, I still felt like I was somehow being mocked. "What do you mean? Am I calling about the roommate ad? Who is this? Why do you keep calling me and stop playing around?" What I said came out a lot more aggressive than I think I meant it to be. I was becoming more and more irritated at whatever was happening. "Stop playing around. Are you calling? I'm hanging up. Don't ever call me again," I said angrily, hanging up the phone as I threw it towards the bed. I covered my face and tried to massage the tension out of my face. This was getting ridiculous. Whoever was pranking me on the other end of the line was simply repeating everything I was saying. It felt incredibly juvenile. You know how you would mock your friends by just repeating what they were saying? I remember a lot of my bullies in elementary school would do this exact same thing. It was a lame and lazy way to bully someone, but it was effective in drowning out someone's voice. Looking back, I thought that might have partly been the cause as to why I didn't like talking to people much. Maybe I was always afraid that they would just mock and make fun of me. My parents certainly didn't help with that. Over the next few weeks, the phone calls started to intensify. Unlike before, these calls were starting to come later at night and even through the morning. My sleeping schedule started to get worse as these calls were continuously waking me up. Even if I put my phone on silent, my phone would still ring and vibrate. I thought that maybe my phone really was broken, but even if it was, I didn't have the money to get it repaired. Each call I picked up, I was still met with the same sort of mimicry and repetition. But as soon as I realized this, I would hang up immediately. I had started to text some of my friends about what was happening, and they all gave me more or less the same response. They told me to just stop accepting phone calls if I was getting this upset about it, or block them. I don't think they fully understood that it was a new number each time, and therefore impossible to block beforehand. Any other person might have stopped answering altogether, but I desperately needed to find a roommate as I only had about a month left until my lease was up. From when I'm writing this post, I didn't receive another call until about 2 weeks ago. This marked the 13th call I had received from a different number. "Hello," I said, annoyed into the phone immediately after picking it up. I was done trying to act nice or entertain the thought that it was someone actually calling about the Patty. Every new number I now associated with the thought of it being the same as before. "Hello? Are you there? Say something if you can hear me," the voice said. My eyes widened and my entire body froze, in shock as the voice spoke to me. Every call I had received where it spoke back to me sounded like a real phone call. I could hear the static of the line and the warped sound of a voice on a phone, but this time, it was that clear, almost present voice of someone physically talking into my ear, just like the breathing I'd heard months before. "Hello? Can you hear me?" it said again. "Are you calling about the roommate ad?" Hang up. Didn't dare reply. It's like the shock had locked me out of my body. All I could do was try to find my composure and listen. "Hello? Hello? Hey, who is this? This really isn't funny anymore." The voice continued to whisper and mock into my ear. After what seemed like a lifetime, I finally mustered up the courage to respond. What do you want?" I whispered out. "What do you want?" it whispered back to me. I want you to stop calling me," I answered angrily, not even realizing I was technically responding to my own question. "I want you to stop calling me," it said back almost immediately. "Stop fucking repeating me," I screamed into the phone. "Stop fucking repeating me," it screamed back. This was the first time the voice had yelled, but only because I had yelled. The sheer force and surprise of it caused me to freeze, just waiting for it to say something else. All I could hear was static from the phone, despite the fact that the voice had none of that static. I calmed down and prepared to speak again. "Hello," we both said at the same time. I realized in that moment why the voice was wrong and why it bothered me so much. It was my voice. I could never nail it before because we spoke at different times. But after hearing it speak with me, and hearing absolutely no difference between mine and its, I knew that it was, and had been, talking to me with my own voice the entire time. Hung up the phone and blocked the number immediately. As my panic and anxiety rose, I went through every call I had received and blocked each individual number. I didn't know what this would solve because it was a new number each time, but this gave me at least some sort of control over a situation where I was desperately lacking it. After that, the time of day didn't matter to it anymore. The calls came frequently and unrelentingly through the day and night for the next 2 weeks. I never picked them up, but it didn't matter. I could barely sleep, and my paranoia about the situation increased with each call. Even when I did manage to sleep, the ringing would work its way into my dreams and cause me to wake up hyperventilating and my sheets soaked with sweat. Sometimes a noise in a TV show or the beeping of a machine at work would trigger these thoughts, and I would instantly be overwhelmed with dread. When my phone did ring, I often just stared at it, waiting and willing it to stop ringing. I was afraid that whoever or whatever it was had finally gotten what it wanted, and I was scared of what it might say if I answered just one more time. I decided I would go back around my college area and take my ads down. I didn't care what happened next with my apartment or if taking down the signs would help. I just wanted the calls to stop. I would even move back across the country to live with my parents again if I had to. As much as I also dreaded that idea, by the morning of when I wrote this post, there were a total of 111 missed calls from 111 different numbers. I didn't know if this would ever stop, but I knew that I shouldn't answer it again. Unfortunately, I did answer one more time, but not on purpose. I had just gotten home after collecting all my signs from the college area. As much as the ringing had almost become like a part of me, I didn't hear or feel my phone vibrating. All I heard was the muffle of a voice under me as I was sitting on my bed watching TV. I took my phone out of my pocket and saw that someone had called and that I had answered it somehow. Whether it was a butt dial answer or what, I didn't know, but I could hear someone talking on the other end. Cautiously and afraid of what I might hear, I slowly put the phone up to my ear and listened. Hello? Hello? Anyone there? My name's John. I'm calling about the roommate AD. End of part 1. Never try to bench press without a spotter. As I dropped my phone on the worn, gray, formerly black, rubberized floor, I noted the time as 1:22 in the morning. One of the few perks of working the closing shift was that once I got off work at midnight, I had the entire gym facility for myself. If it weren't for my ritual of procrastinating, doom scrolling, and half-hearted warm-ups, I would already be 30 minutes into my workout. After throwing a few plates on the bar, I slid onto the cool, smooth faux leather of the bench and lay my head back. The familiar wobble side to side as I got settled was like the embrace of an old friend. The secluded, worn-down old Smith machine was by far my favorite in the 24/7 gym. All the brand logos appeared to be rubbed off by the incessant use of sweaty bodies. But to me, it was special. Using it reminded me of the old, creaking pull-up station my father had taught me to use in his garage many years ago. It made me feel nostalgic. Disengaging the safety mechanism on the Smith machine, I slowly lowered the weight until it just barely touched my chest, before forcing it back up with ease, the barbell making a satisfying metal-on-metal sound against the guide rails. A lot of people may find working a night shift to be lonely or depressing, but I always thrived when I could live with the independence that comes with being alone, especially at the gym, a place that was bursting at the seams with the sounds and smells of people pushing their bodies to the limits. At least, that was how the gym felt during normal business hours. But at night, what would normally be a minefield of self-deprecating comparisons and distractions turned into a playground for me and, rarely, a few other individuals. I continued with another set after increasing my weight slightly. It was challenging, but I had no struggle pushing the weight. Every time I allowed it to lower, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the hum of the HVAC, and the rhythmic up and down motion and sounds lulled me into a meditative state. I was rudely awakened by a sudden flash of pain, with a sickening pop and what I imagined a drumstick being torn from a chicken would feel like. My right shoulder gave out under the 100 kilograms of metal, crashing towards me like a semi-truck on ice. My good arm buckled despite its valiant attempts to keep the weight up. For a second, I panicked. As cliché as it sounded, my life flashed before my eyes. But mostly, I thought of how my family would react. I could imagine my parents, fiancé, and some distant relatives gathered around a headstone, reading simply, "He died like an idiot," or even worse, I could be found by some fellow gym-goer who would only laugh at my corpse crumpled beneath such a meager weight. I would die from embarrassment if I wasn't already dead. Fortunately, I had the presence of mind to twist my wrists, despite the screaming pain from my right arm, and felt the bar click into a fixed position, directly pressing on my sternum. My heart pounded in my chest, seeming to reverberate against the cold steel pushing back on it. My breaths came in short, wheezing gasps, exhausted from the exertion and pain. I began to scold myself internally as my breathing became shallow due to the obstacle preventing my chest from fully expanding. I should know better than to bench without a spotter, my internal critic monologued. I knew that, but arrogance had clearly gotten the better of my self-preservation instinct. Since the bar rotated hooks, allowing it to stop before the weight could fall on you, I assumed that the machine would be safe enough to use alone. However, now the pressure sitting like a rock on my chest, forcing my small crucifix to dig painfully into my skin, convinced me that this was not as risk-free as I had imagined. Pushing aside the nagging voice, I began to shimmy with my feet, sliding my butt down the surface of the bench. Slowly, painfully, my chest slipped out from under the metal vise it had been held in. I gasped as I could feel the warm trickle of blood underneath my hoodie. From where the wooden charm I wore had sloughed off a few layers of skin that were stretched over my rising and falling chest. I took a few seconds, just reveling in the newfound freedom to breathe, before I gritted my teeth and tried to pull my head out from under the bar. But no matter how I twisted, turned, or maneuvered my head, an ear, jawbone, or my skull itself halted my progress. I started to sob in desperation, kicking my feet like an impudent child. The barbell simply hovered with a menacing stillness, mere inches from my exposed windpipe. Despite my predicament, I began to laugh uncontrollably. I knew I would survive this after all, but the embarrassment of being found in such a compromising position seemed suddenly amusing. So, I simply lay there, unable to reach my phone, with no one around to help. I hoped that soon, some other lonely night shifter would wander in and find my predicament. I felt dizzy, dehydrated, and completely alone. The fluorescent lights seemed more like the blazing orange sun of a desert, ready to bleach my bones white after the circling vultures had their fill. Rather than continue to ponder my uncomfortable position and my own stupidity, I decided to shut my eyes and rest until help arrived. I jolted awake sometime later when I heard the doors clatter open. "Hello," I called out, voice strained. "Please help me out here." I heard footsteps squeaking across the floor as I began to babble some half-hearted explanation of my status, all while blinking bleary eyes against the incessant clinical brightness of the gym. After finishing my speech, I took a pause to breathe, only then realizing that the stranger had stopped a few feet away from my head, and they continued to stand there in silence. "Would you mind giving me a hand?" My pitiful cry seemed to echo in the quiet and stillness, the only answer being ragged, raspy breathing that came from the figure. I strained to look back and see this not-so-good Samaritan, but could only make out a pair of legs and a torso wearing long black clothes. Some small primeval side of my brain told me to be very still and very silent as my breathing grew panicked and shallow, matching the crescendo of the stranger's excited husky gasps. With a sudden lurch of movement, the hulking, hooded shape lunged past me and lifted a plate off the nearby rack. I gritted my teeth together, screwing my eyes shut for the impending blow, but instead heard the familiar metallic click of weight being loaded onto the bar. I watched in sheer horror as the masked and hooded man began to eagerly place weight after weight on each side of the fixed bar, until the frame of the machine began to groan in protest. With cold certainty, I knew this assailant was going to try to crush me under the over half a ton of weight, with my neck perfectly lined up for the modern-day guillotine. With renewed desperation, I slammed my chin and face into the unmoving barrier, preventing my escape. I tried in desperation to cry out for help, praying that some unlikely passerby would save me, or more realistically, just be a witness to my horrific fate. With a burst of speed, a large, calloused hand wrapped around my mouth as the other reached towards the barbell, twisting slowly. To no surprise, the masked killer was trying to release the creaking metal pole from the safety clip, and I had a feeling he wasn't trying to help me set a new PR. In an animal attempt to survive, I scratched and punched at the tree trunks of forearms above me and bit down on the tough leather of his hand, filling my mouth with the bitter, tangy taste of blood. To my increasing horror and revulsion, the man only made a soft, chuckling groan, halfway between pain, exertion, and arousal. I could feel and taste how his unwashed skin glistened with sweat and feel his rapid heartbeat on his wrists. This sick freak was enjoying this. Then, with a snap that made my stomach drop, the bar was freed from its safeguards and began to press down with insurmountable pressure. In the instant before the impending death could shatter my fragile throat, I decided to try a desperate move I had not considered before, hooking my feet around the old, unreliable at best, bench frame. I jerked my body weight suddenly to the left side. As the weight came down, so did the bench. I flipped over onto my side, face planting directly into the frame of the machine. Stars burst in my vision as a warm geyser shot from what remained of my nose. With a resounding explosion of sound, the barbell finally stopped, impacting hard with the floor. But due to the width of the plates and my face-down position slumped underneath the toppled bench, I had barely escaped near certain death. Giving myself no time to feel relieved, I sprang up, striking my head on a different part of the frame as I went, filling my vision with a new constellation of stars. Blinking through the pain, I was both glad and frightened to see that my attacker had vanished. My thoughts raced around my head, which was being racked by wave after wave of fresh pain. My cell phone was nowhere to be found, and I glanced around uneasily, each of the once familiar wait stations and machines now turning into an arsenal of death traps for this madman. Grabbing a small kettlebell, I began to quietly creep between the rows, intimately aware of every sound. The silence lay unbroken, excluding the shuffle of my feet and the steady pitter-patter of scarlet dripping from my busted face. My right arm dangled uselessly, each step sending a shock wave of pain through it, from the fingertip all the way up, as my left arm brandished the kettlebell overhead. I tried to shuffle back to the front entrance of the facility when I was stopped dead in my tracks with fresh fear. The killer was standing, silhouetted against the glass doors and windows, his frame going up past the exit sign. Taking it in now, I could see that he stood at least 7 feet tall, with his shoulders alone being too wide to fit through any average Dr. frame. His head was turned down, and out from under his surgical-style mask, thick layers of drool were pooling onto the tile below him. He continued to grunt, a deeply unnerving sound, as he lumbered towards me, oven mitt-sized hands clenched into fists. I started to step back, compelled by terror to just run away from the inhuman mass of muscle and loathing coming towards me. But then my eyes caught the corner of a small sticker proudly emblazoned on the double glass, magnetically locked doors of the entrance. I remember from passively observing it day after day. The sign reads, "Protected by Safeguard Systems, LLC. With the last reserves of strength left in my body, I raise and hurl the 8 kg hunk of iron from my left hand. The stranger ducks his head and raises his arms defensively, clearly surprised at my last-ditch effort to survive. But the projectile flies true and shatters the glass on impact, causing the shrill scream of alarms to echo throughout the almost empty building. I know with grim satisfaction that help is on the way, and I saw the hooded figure stop and consider this. To my shock, he simply turned and exited through the ruined doors, broad shoulders slumped in disappointment when I could no longer feel the impact of his massive footfalls through the ground. I sank to my knees and collapsed from the agony throughout my whole body. When I gave this whole story to the mildly interested, overweight cop who stood at my hospital bedside, it sounded far less horrifying and mostly plain absurd. Improbably, the DNA the attacker left behind at the scene matched no known criminal in their database. And soon, the whole case went cold and was shuffled to some folder in the back of an office, no doubt. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, I was told it was basically hopeless, but I was too glad to be alive to care. Despite destroying a very expensive piece of equipment and a literal door, the gym even offered me a lifetime free membership as consolation for my near-death ordeal. But due to the months of physical therapy I knew lay ahead of me, I politely declined their generous offer. Besides, I think calisthenics will be more my style now. Weightlifting can be dangerous after all. I found a strange entity in the woods many years ago. Many times I have been asked to share my story by curious travelers and investigators of the paranormal, the transmundane, and many times have I told it, even at my age, when the years melt together and the memory fades. I can still recall every detail of the happenings that occurred during that time. I have opted to put it to writing so that the inquisitive among you may read it and understand it. Recall now a strange experience in my life, stranger than you could possibly imagine. It was many years ago, when I was a young man on a journey of self-discovery, seeking some sort of new truth that had previously been overlooked or forgotten by the world. My journey began in San Francisco, where I had lived for a time, and took me across the contiguous United States and Canada. After many weeks of traveling by foot and by bus and by train, I found myself in a peculiar town by the name of Cold Harbor. Only accessible by bus, the town was small and hardly worth mentioning, save for the eccentric mannerisms of its inhabitants. With some exceptions, all deliberately avoided any and all interaction with me. I know now the reason for this behavior, but at the time, it perplexed me. I made the decision to check into a small inn, seeing as it was nightfall and the dreary clouds that hung overhead signaled an imminent rain. At this establishment was where I first heard the rumors about it, something which lay within the confines of the nearby forests, after it fell from the heavens. Whatever it was, it sent the imaginative parts of my mind ablaze with vivid visions of alien colors and other things not of this world. "What's this thing he's talking about out in the woods?" I asked the proprietor of the inn over a glass of cold beer, referring to another customer who spoke to me of such things. He paused while wiping the counter at which I sat, and an odd look crossed his face. His voice dropped low, and a darkness crept into it that I had never heard before or since, save for my recollection of its tone. "There are queer things in the forest, or so I hear. Queer things that no man should dare to see, northwest of here. You're best off staying away from the trees, especially after dark," he said to me, his gaze locked to mine. After a pause, he resumed cleaning as if he had not just spoken as he had. though his words were meant to dissuade me from going out to the forest, they only fanned the flames of my interest. Out into the forest, I went the next morning with my compass and other belongings, as I intended to move on to the next town after checking out whatever it was that lay in the woods. I headed northwest of the inn as the innkeeper had said, traversing a dirt hiking path for several miles, up and then down the mountain. Eventually, I came to the end of the trail by midday and continued on off trail, navigating the wilds with only my gear and my wits to guide me. By the afternoon, I began to notice some peculiarities in the flora of the mountains that seemed to defy my comprehension. Strange repetitions of patterns began to emerge in the vines and bushes I stepped over and through to navigate, and the air of the forest became bone-chillingly still, with not the sound of the wind, as though the forest were holding its breath. I began to question my own judgment. When I found it, in the clearing I saw something beyond words that can only be described and understood by analogy or metaphor. It stood, or rather floated, in the center of the clearing, its crystalline, prismatic shape shimmering softly in the evening light. It bent and fell into itself recursively, its patterns flipping and repeating endlessly, and I felt the sense that I had encountered something truly not of this world. This entity is obviously of alien origin, I thought to myself. As I approached it, I felt a curious tingling in my body, unlike any I had felt before, and a pressure behind my eyes that built with every step, every breath. The closer I got to the entity, the greater both sensations became, even as the tingling and pressure became pain, as my body felt like it was engulfed in flames. It beckoned me closer. I began to move forward almost in a trance or on impulse, growing every so closer and closer until I stood in front of the entity and stared into its abyss. The pain stopped as though a switch had been flipped off, and I was left to stare with nothing to obstruct my gaze as I looked deeper into it. I gazed into infinity and saw nothing, at least nothing I could understand. I saw the cryptic vestige of what lay beyond the earth, what lay beyond what the human mind could grasp, a message from higher beings that the fathomless darkness of the cosmic abyss held in its deepest depths. It was as if I was engaged in a conversation with a man who did not speak my language. At some point in that night, I must have lost consciousness, for I woke up in that clearing the next morning to find the entity had disappeared entirely, save for a divot in the ground where it had stood, shaken. I gathered myself and my things and began the hike back into Cold Harbor, where I managed to catch the first bus out of town. Most I told the story to didn't believe me. They rolled their eyes in incredulity and told me I should consider being a writer of science fiction, insisting that I had just had a fantastical dream that night. Some suggested I be institutionalized, having obviously gone insane after spending so long on the road and away from home. Others believed my story, but they were the types to believe in little green men and flying saucers, and so I humored their requests. I doubt very much the claims of it being a dream or a hallucination, as I know my own mind. I still understand very little of what I saw, but I do know this. Something terrifying came to that forest, and something still persists there. I should hope that nothing negative happens to me. My exposure to the entity was prolonged, and the consequences of that exposure are still unclear all these years later. One last word of caution. Stay away from the forests northwest of Cold Harbor, should you choose to visit it. I would hate for your nightmares to be plagued by the same madness that plagues mine. As soon as I saw her red boots, I should have kept driving. I should have turned around. Last night I found myself alone on a dark country road in Oregon, my car making that sick sputtering sound of a dying engine. I had already driven miles past the nearest gas station, and when the engine finally coughed and died just after midnight, I cursed myself for not filling up earlier. The needle was in the empty zone. There was no cell signal out here, and the hazards blinked away in the silence. I jiggled the ignition a few more times. Nothing. That's when I saw her, a figure in the distance, standing by the side of the road. A woman in a tattered coat and red boots, waving at me. My headlights barely lit her up, but I could see her pale face and wild eyes. There was no town or house for miles, just black trees swallowed by fog. I rationalized. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe I shouldn't have stopped. My better judgment was screaming for me to keep driving, but something kept me on the brake. I rolled down the passenger window. It was freezing outside. The woman leaned in, thin hands gripping the door frame, long black hair tangled over her shoulders. In a trembling voice, she told me her name was Mia, that her car had broken down a few miles back, and that she needed a ride to the next town. I glanced behind me. Nothing was there except the dark sky. Her voice was steady, not frantic. At first, I hesitated. I'd heard every warning about picking up strangers at night, but her eyes looked so helpless. Against my gut, I said, "Sure, hop in." Mia climbed into the passenger seat. She had no bags except a crumpled purse. As she settled in, the old car radio sputtered back to life. Static at first, then nothing. She turned it off. An old country ballad flickered on for a moment before she shrugged and asked me to pull away. I could barely hear her quiet. "Thank you, I appreciate it." Over the engine's rumble, I tried to make small talk. "Where are you heading?" I asked as we slowly gained speed. Mia just shrugged, staring straight ahead. The car lurched as I accelerated. My headlights bounced off the thick pines lining the narrow road. Despite the heater blasting full, I felt a strange chill. 10 minutes passed without a word. Mia was eerily still, her expression fixed like a statue. I stole a glance at her pale face. Her eyes reflected nothing but darkness. I offered to call someone for help. She shook her head. "There was no phone signal here," she said. She was fine, actually relieved not to be alone. And then she spoke again, almost too softly to hear. "Turn off the radio." I nearly jumped. I hadn't realized the country song was still playing faintly. I flicked the switch and the car was plunged into silence. Just the hum of the engine and Mia's calm breathing. I shivered. She smiled at me in the rearview mirror. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm okay now." Suddenly, a pair of bright high beams appeared behind us in the mirror. A truck had sped up behind, then slowed and drifted back. My stomach hit the floor. I hadn't seen another vehicle on this road in hours. Mia's eyes were fixed on the mirror too, but she said nothing. Mia let out a soft laugh. "You must have thought I was hitchhiking. Strange, isn't it? Me standing here after midnight," she said with a shaky smile. I just nodded. In the side mirror, I saw the truck had pulled over a bit further back, engine off. I couldn't see who was inside, but it made me uneasy. I told myself the driver was probably just worried, making sure we were safe. I glanced at Mia. She seemed almost satisfied. Then, without warning, The truck's engine roared to life and it shot forward. There were no headlights or taillights. 1 second it was there. The next, it was simply gone. The silence returned. My hands shook on the wheel. I looked at Mia. She just gave me a calm smile. Her skin was unnaturally cold through her jacket. For one long moment we drove in silence. Me breathing hard, her breathing quiet and steady. Finally, the neon lights of a 24-hour gas station flickered ahead. Relief flooded me. "Turn here," Mia said quietly, nodding toward the pumps. "Fill up the tank," she explained. "They'll be okay if I wait here." I pulled in, and the gravel crunched under my tires. I hurried inside the station to prepay. The cashier gave me a questioning look, but I lied and said I was fine. "Be safe out there," he said as I grabbed my change and turned to leave. I waved and rushed back outside, about to help Mia with the gas can. But she was gone. The passenger seat was empty. A crumpled piece of paper lay on the seat. My breath caught as I recognized the number scrawled on it. It was the same number listed on a missing person report I had glanced at earlier that day. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an old unsaved number. "Thanks for the ride." I nearly dropped it. When I opened my messages, I saw other replies I never wrote. My own tone, but words I never typed. "Drive safe now," one read. "Be careful on the road," another. I know this sounds insane, but I had to write it down. I'm sitting here under the flickering gas station sign, 3:47 a.m., engine finally off. I still feel her eyes on me, even though she's gone. Please, if you ever see a lone figure on a dark road late at night, think twice. Not all passengers are what they seem. Good night. Or maybe tomorrow if I'm lucky enough to wake up where the trees don't move. I don't remember why I came out here. Just that I needed to leave. My apartment, the city, my phone buzzing with messages I didn't care about anymore. Everything was noise. Everything felt like pressure behind my eyes. So I drove. I didn't plan a route. I took back roads, then dirt roads. Then nothing, just a tree line, and the feeling that I was finally away from whatever had been clawing at me. I left the car at the edge and walked in. At first, it was peaceful. The air was cool and damp, and the only sounds were the crunch of my boots and the occasional distant bird call. I felt like I was sinking into something ancient, something that didn't care about deadlines or phone calls or whatever I was trying to escape. I thought I'd hike a little, write in my journal, and come back. But I never found the same path twice. I tried marking trees. I scraped bark with my keys, broke low branches. But somehow when I turned around, nothing was where I left it. The tree I marked was gone. The branch I snapped was whole again. I laughed at first. Maybe I was just disoriented. Forests could be like that, right? But the laughter didn't last. The forest was wrong. Too still. There was no wind, no rustling, no life beyond my own. Even my breathing felt loud. The deeper I went, the more the silence pressed in on me like a hand around my neck. I thought I saw something just ahead. Between two trees, a structure. It looked like a cabin, or what was left of one. I approached, hoping for shelter or maybe even a way out. It was old, wooden, sagging inward, like it had been forgotten a long time ago. The door hung open slightly, like it had been waiting. Inside, it was dark. The smell was damp and sour. like mold and something faintly sweet. Decay. The walls were carved with words, names mostly, dozens of them, some in shaky cursive, others in jagged block letters. Many were scratched out violently, deep gouges that tore through wood. And then I saw my name, not just my first name, my full name, carved neatly, fresh. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. I didn't hear anything, but I felt something behind me. The forest again. When I turned back, it had changed. The trees were closer. There was no path, no space between trunks. Like the woods had crept forward when I wasn't watching. I ran. I didn't look where. I just moved. The trees watched. I know they watched, not with eyes, but with something deeper, old, patient. Eventually, I collapsed. Couldn't tell how far I'd gone or how long I'd been running. Night had fallen again, or maybe it had always been night. That was when I found my journal. It was open, a page near the back. My handwriting, shaky, like it had been written in a rush. But I never wrote this. Stop running. Lie down. Let it take you. The journal felt cold, damp, like it had been buried. I haven't slept. Every time I close my eyes, I hear breathing. Not mine. Slow, rhythmic, deep as the earth. And every time I blink, the trees get closer. They never move when I watch, but they're always closer, and they're waiting for me to blink